Hi, tonight's night 3 of our virtual date nights in the month of February. Tonight we're talking about communication and conflict. Tonight we started out with a roasted cauliflower soup as our appetizer. For our main courses, we had a green salad with celery, red onion, some lemon and olive oil, roasted potatoes on the side, and a white flaky cod with a ginger, garlic, and mustard seed sauce on top, with some strawberries dipped in dark chocolate for dessert.
Hi, I'm Michael Canner, licensed professional counselor and counseling director here at Anchored Mind.
And I'm Kristen Canner, registered dietitian and nutrition director here at Anchored Mind.
A lot of what we've learned has come from the leading researchers in the field, the Gottman Institute. One of the first things that they promote is the idea of the 4 horsemen: criticism, defensiveness, stonewalling, and contempt. Kristen and I have had a lot of practice with what to do, but also what not to do. And each of us struggled with at least one of these areas early on in our relationship, and we still have to manage it. So, honey, do you want to start with one?
Yeah, I would say the top 2 that are the most difficult for me are stonewalling and defensiveness. More so in the beginning of our marriage. We've worked on these a lot, but for stonewalling, that was my specialty, I'd say. I got really good at building high walls and feeling really comfortable behind them and isolating, withdrawing. And it didn't allow for us to work through things together and made it very difficult in the beginning. So we had to call that out and figure that out.
Early on in our marriage, we didn't really have the language yet. We were still learning a lot about ourselves just from being with another person who's different, but also we were learning a lot about each other. So when she would put up this wall, it would be very difficult for me. I would feel abandoned and rejected. Sometimes it would even make me angry. I really wanted to be able to explain myself. And if I could, I think in this magical way, if she could just understand where I'm coming from, well, that would fix all the negative emotions. But obviously that wasn't true.
And the more he would try and understand, made me feel the need to kind of isolate more and try and process on my own. That's how I was used to trying to figure it out. The more pressure I felt made it even more uncomfortable, and I really needed to find that space and silence. So I wasn't doing it intentionally. I think it was just probably a habit and a way of processing that I had formed prior to marriage.
We would have these differences in feelings and needs. Things started to escalate. Things would get more tense. We would get frustrated with each other. It was like we were talking in 2 directions. And so when that would happen and we'd get to this point of almost no return, we practiced hitting the pause button. And the agreement we had was, let's take a 20 to 30 minute break. Go to our corners of the ring, distract ourselves, calm down, and then we can revisit the problem when we're both in a better place.
We got to the point of identifying that I was kind of, quote, maybe behind the wall a little bit and was having trouble being able to process out loud with him and kind of needed some space and time. And so we would at least start by making that agreement that we would come back and talk about it at a certain time together. And that gave me that safety of behind the wall and less pressure. And then since we had an agreed time, I think that made you feel more comfortable and less abandoned, probably.
Exactly.
So we started there, and then it progress forward.
That really helped us. I mean, really to the point where we don't have to do that at all
ever.
Anymore.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird.
Natural now. In the beginning, I felt like this is super weird, and why do I have to do this? Why do I have to change this? This is my way of processing. And so it was uncomfortable to make those requests from one another, but it really has evolved into something very natural, and it's not so formal anymore.
Yeah. And side note, that's very normal. I mean, a lot of the couples that I work with will initially say, this feels a little weird. This isn't us. This doesn't feel natural. These concepts are going to feel foreign because most of us did not grow up in families that talked this way or practiced this type of communication. But it also doesn't have to stop there. This can absolutely become your own language. It can feel more natural. And so it's just a starting point to practice new skills.
Yeah, new skills.
It's critical to highlight what we do when we take that break. Are we doing things that continue to fuel the negative emotions that we're feeling in that moment? Or is it something where we can literally hit the pause button in our heads just to kind of dim the fire a little bit and distract ourselves? So there's all kinds of things that we can do, from a creative outlet, something physical like exercise or stretching or taking a walk. There would even be times where we would walk together and I would just let her process and speak when she's ready. That was the stepping stone from moving to the point where we literally needed to take a break and go into separate spaces because it was just hard to communicate. And there's some really cool science about moving in the same direction, not making eye contact, looking the same way.
That really helped me because when I get behind that wall, my energy or self-talk, it fuels it.
Maybe justifies why you're upset.
Yeah. And I had to learn how to like change my self-talk a little bit, but the walking, I feel like, got me going in that direction. It was something parallel to you and not away from you, not fueling the fire, but it wasn't the pressure of having to talk through it at that moment.
Yeah, I think it was regulating for both of us. Just helped us kind of calm our nervous systems, calm our minds, and realize, oh, we're in this together and we're actually on the same team and we want the same thing, which is to care about each other, to meet each other's needs. The horseman that has been the most challenging for me has been criticism, and is honestly something I still have to monitor. The way I'm wired, the way I was brought up, my brain is very good at analysis. It's good at finding problems and fixing them or making things better. And although that helps me in the therapy room, it can get me in trouble at home. I will start to notice things in behavior or in the way things are done, and I'll point out ways of changing or fixing. Although the intent is to make it about things, it's hard for someone not to take that personally in an intimate relationship. You want to talk about how that would affect you?
And then I become defensive.
Whose fault is that? And this is actually one of the most common things I see in couples who come into counseling. You can justify your position very easily. Well, if she wouldn't do what she does, I wouldn't be critical. Well, if he wouldn't say what he says, I wouldn't be defensive. It ends up promoting a negative cycle, turning into the blame game or keeping score, and before you know it, there is a battle that has no end in sight. It doesn't lead us to mutual understanding, which is always the goal. Do we end up protecting ourselves or do we protect our relationship? I certainly gravitated towards protecting myself over the relationship because I'm a perfectionist. I don't like to be wrong or imperfect.
Protecting the relationship, that helped me a lot because made it a little easier to depersonalize, which made it easier to understand and to work together towards a marriage goal instead of just an individual preference.
Let's talk through the antidotes to the Four Horsemen. So the antidote for criticism is called the soft startup. What we want to do is shift our tone, shift our pace, and move towards a more respectful, patient, and kind approach. And not only expressing how we feel, but also what we need from our partner. The antidote to defensiveness is taking responsibility. What?
This is hard for me to take responsibility. I had to practice that a lot, taking responsibility. It can be difficult when you're feeling defensive.
Yeah, it totally can. We want to protect our perspective, especially if we think we're right. It's essentially saying information is more important than the relationship. The antidote to defensiveness is taking responsibility. It's owning something that you forgot, that you did incorrectly, or really that you did something that was different than what your partner preferred. It's not about your performance or your lack of ability. It's actually about your partner. They're experiencing an emotion that hijacked their perspective, and you're temporarily making that the priority. You're saying, I care about how you feel and what you need, and I can admit that I could have done something differently.
Taking responsibility and practicing leaning into the feelings first without defending the information or the action that was present is difficult, I think, for those of us who are on the other side of a criticism.
I passionately believed the criticism that I was pointing out was really something that could be better or improved. And
it just didn't go over well.
No.
At all.
And so then you'd get defensive.
And I would defend the information or what was happening, and I get really frustrated from that, and then, not lean into his feelings or maybe what would have caused that criticism at all.
And then, as our relationship continued to blossom, something magical happened. It flipped. And there were moments where she would be critical, and I would get defensive. And we found that we were both pretty good at both. We really had to lean into some of these practices, make these antidotes our own language, make it feel a little bit more natural. And even asking for help. Hey, I'm not trying to be critical. Can you help me make sure this doesn't land that way?
And ask us the question of like, what do we need to do to figure out how to feel connected at the end of the day today? Because I know that we're both in different places on this conversation. We both don't agree, but how do we get to a place where we're protecting the connection in our marriage so that, because we both know that we want that, but these other things are getting in the way.
Thankfully, the final horseman, which is contempt, has not been present in our relationship and hopefully never will. According to research, contempt is the biggest predictor of divorce. It is really the negative view of your partner. It can run pretty deep, and unfortunately it's pretty difficult to turn around. However, there is an antidote for it, and so if it is present in your relationship, focus on the positive qualities of your partner to find gratitude in some of the things that they are trying to do, which will then change your perception. In seasons of perpetual conflict where it just seems like everyone's on edge and you're more likely to get into bickering or even an argument more easily than other seasons. The Gottmans call that negative sentiment override. It's almost like red lenses are coming over your view of your partner, and you're just anticipating a negative comment or just conflict in general. Mm-hmm. We've been there.
We have been there.
Yeah.
You calling it that actually was really helpful too. Labeling it. Then we had something to practice or to focus on, getting out of that.
Just like emotions, name it to tame it. Kristen and I are grateful to have had exposure to some couples that we admire. And some of the things that we've noticed that they practice is a shared vision. That is something that fills both of our tanks and gives us really a sense of purpose in our relationship.
Taking time together, even like a date night or a breakfast or a weekend away, we always are intentional about taking time to dream together, which is very life-giving for us.
It promotes a we-ness over a me-ness. We have our own lanes and our own interests, but there's this middle lane that we both share and come together on. It also is a healthy distraction from any of the potential conflicts that we could run into. It reminds me of one of our family friends who pulled us off the dance floor at our wedding and gave us some timeless advice.
Don't look for the storms.
Don't look for the storms.
Yeah.
The best thing we can do is practice small things often. Just the little things every day. Incremental investments in each other's emotional bank accounts.
And I didn't realize how much on the other side of that the negative little things, day after day, hour by hour, just really can pick you apart as a couple and take you down. I mean, just by little things that build up too much.
It is said that relationships can die by the death of 1,000 cuts over time. So we want to do the opposite. We want to prevent those cuts. And if a cut ever happens, we want to take responsibility and repair it. How often are we having these little tiffs or little conflicts versus how often are we doing the right things to connect us? This has actually been quantified. The goal is to have a ratio of 5 positive interactions to every 1 negative. And it's interesting what is considered positive and negative. So a positive interaction is called turning towards instead of away. If she says something to me, the best thing I can do is listen and acknowledge that I heard her voice. It could even be a nonverbal, like a nod or a smile. Some of the other things that are considered small things often that we can practice in investing in each other's emotional bank accounts is choosing the positive perspective. If I notice something that was off or didn't land well, choosing to assume the best. Maybe my partner is having a bad day or is stressed, or maybe they didn't mean for that to come out the way it did. How could I let them know that it didn't land well without maybe attacking them back with criticism? Choosing the positive perspective is really choosing those green lenses instead of the red ones. I'm looking at them with positive intent.
I didn't like practicing that at first because once something made me feel upset, I kind of got stuck in that place. And he kept encouraging me to practice looking for positive intent. And it really was adverse to that. I did not like that. But it did help me a lot because I started to say to myself, really, after all this time, Michael would be intending to make me feel that way? That doesn't make sense at all. So, yes, I feel this way, but he's not trying to make me feel that way. So let's find a way to meet in the middle and prioritize our connection, because at the end of the day, do we really want this to take over? And it doesn't have to.
One of the other things that we can practice in regard to small things often is fondness and admiration. And really that's looking for opportunities to highlight not only great things that our partner does throughout the day, but also things about them that we appreciate. Because she is so task driven, there is almost always something for me to find that I can show appreciation for. And it could be in the form of words, it could be in the form of a hug. Thank you so much for that delicious dinner. Thank you so much for taking care of our girls. Anything that I notice and that I know she's really invested in fills her emotional bank account, makes her feel seen and loved and appreciated.
And for me, taking time to notice the things that Michael has put a lot of energy into, or the detail that he has put into his projects or his work or his time with us really makes a difference.
What we've appreciated the most in our marriage from the Gottman Institute is practicing small things often. It's turning towards instead of away, practicing the positive perspective, and promoting fondness and admiration in one another. And when we get into those rare moments of conflict, we're practicing the antidotes to the 4 horsemen.
Thanks for joining us tonight for virtual date night number 3 on communication and conflict. We'd love if you could join us next week where we wrap it up all together.